Welcome. My name is Melissa Bader, and this is Would You Like to Know More About? And today we're doing district guided pathways. Today I have two guests with me in our podcast. This is our fifth podcast at Norco College. We're going to start with Deanna Morell. Would you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Deanna Morell, and I'm counseling faculty at Moreno Valley College. I'm also the Vice President of Academic Senate as well, and I'm a former Guided Pathways lead, but I am still helping in the realm of engagement centers.
That's great. Thanks, Deanna. And Dr. Monique Green.
Hello there. I'm Dr. Monique Green. I'm at Riverside City College, and I am counseling faculty as well. I'm previously the Guided Pathways coordinator. This is my first term outside of that position, but I still am entrenched in a lot of the work that we do around student voice and also the online orientation, revamping onboarding process for students.
Right. And I have asked these amazing people to come and talk to me today because we've worked together for the past 3 years or 4 years?
4, I think 4 years.
4 years. We have been the 3 Guided Pathways faculty leads. I'm still in that position. They have now moved on. Thank you for the hard work that you did and all the work that you did on Guided Pathways and equity. So I thought it would be really great for us to get together today and talk about a little bit of district coordination and a little bit of how we work together. We never really had a formal team created. The 3 of us ended up exchanging numbers and being support systems. But I wanted to ask both of you to talk about your experience in the hope that maybe someone who is listening who would like to get into Guided Pathways work may know a little bit more about what it's like to work in a multi-college district and to coordinate a little bit and have that camaraderie of faculty who are helping to lead this work. So today I'm going to have a couple of questions for you, and please just feel free to jump in as you want. But let's start with how you got into faculty leadership in the Guided Pathways and equity work at your college. Who wants to start?
Go first. So I actually got into Guided Pathways. I was doing my dissertation work at my doctoral program at San Diego State University, and this was before the state was really talking about Guided Pathways. We had a debate in class about how either the pros or cons of Guided Pathways, and I was on the con side, and I was really against, really making students choose right away, creating pathways for them, eliminating their choices. And through that debate, I really realized that we had a lot of work to do on our campuses, and not just, we needed to eliminate some choices to allow our students to move through the pathway to graduate and to move on. And so through that, literally after that debate, I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks later that this position popped up. It was Guided Pathways faculty lead. It was a reassignment position, 100% reassignment. At that time, I was currently the career center coordinator. So I was already doing a lot of the work with students who were undecided and really helping them get onto a path and helping them decide like their future career goals. So I had some experience in that realm. And so through my research, I was like, you know what, I think I can do this. A couple of people came to me and said, I think you should apply for this. And I was like, yeah, maybe. I was really nervous. I was afraid. This was the first time that I was really going to be a campus leader in a space. And I was fairly new to RCC. I think I'd only been there 2 years. But I had something in me said, go for it. And so I interviewed, I applied, and I think this position was definitely life-changing for me.
So you said 100% reassign. And to me, there's a little bit of anxiety in that. And did you have a similar anxiety in that when they say 100% reassign, that means you're going away from the job that you have trained to do and going into a realm and in many ways kind of making it up as you go along. Did you have that experience?
I did definitely have that experience. So there was one previous person in that space. We had a VP of planning and development who was kind of running that role. They worked directly with strategic planning, and there was another faculty member, English faculty member, that was kind of doing some of the work and leading it. So I didn't completely pick up from scratch, but for me, it was from scratch. I mean, it meant days and days of research, days and days of looking through binders from the California Guided Pathways Project, days and days of conference and trainings. And so it was a lot. And I almost needed 100% to be fully in that space and that capacity. And I think that's because I was fully reassigned. That was the only reason I think that I did this work well, or could do this work well.
Well, you did do it well. I'm saying that you did. Deanna, how did you get into this?
So I had attended a couple of guided pathways meetings prior to being a lead. And I was actually asked to be one of the guided pathways leads. And I have to be honest, like I didn't understand the full scope of guided pathways.
Mhm.
But I was excited, right? And I was excited to help the college advance this work. Um, and ensuring, that we were closing equity gaps and really being a part of the redesign efforts. But when I jumped in, it was like, whoa, and I had a 0.2, I believe, starting off. And the most I think I've gotten was a 0.5. So, but it was really, really hard trying to balance, my regular job duties and guided pathways work. And so I did have a couple other, co-leads as well, but it consumes you because it's so much, right? And you
Right.
have so many areas of work, especially within the four pillars. And at first it's really exciting, and you get in, and you're like, okay, where do I start? What do I do? Who do I contact? And the momentum was kind of slow in the beginning, but we were able to pick up. And then when the pandemic hit, like our attendance went from like 30 to like 50, 60.
Mm.
So that was, a definite plus. But just while going through the process, of to where we are now, it was a roller coaster ride, but I was excited to jump in and to really be a support system. And, it was a lot of collaboration, and I didn't even know who like people were or what certain committees did. So it forced me to, get out there and really learn the functions of our college and really put data at the forefront.
You said about 9 really important things in there. I want to pick on one of them, which I had a problem with, which is navigating the strategic functioning of an institution like those that we work at. So you're playing in the Senate pool in many things. So Academic Senate has purview over so many things that you have to work through their systems. You're also working in the administrator system and how administrators make decisions, although you are not an administrator. So you definitely have to have a good administrative partner or ally. You're also working in classified professionals worlds because a lot of the work that we do in Guided Pathways and Equity is done by our classified professionals in their spaces. And you are both counselors. I am not a counseling faculty. So you're bouncing back and forth between counseling faculty, which have a very specific purview and a very specific job. And all of those are being upset and turned on their head. And without saying to people, you've been doing it wrong for the last 100 years. And I think there's this difficulty because you also said restructuring, and we use big words like that in Guided Pathways and Equity, dismantling. That's a very powerful word. So how did either one of you, getting up to speed, to someone who is thinking about doing this, I would say go and sit down with your Senate president first of all, and then also get your partner, get your management partner, and find your classified. Go ahead.
I think to your point too is that I think both Deanna and I stepped into this position not really understanding the strategic planning process, really not understanding like Senate and how it operates and I'd never been to an educational planning oversight committee before. I was never privy to these things. Even as a full-time faculty member, I didn't sit on like large leadership councils or committees. And so being new, and this is where I really want to encourage people who are new but excited to transform the way that we do things, is to step into this role. Because this role allows you to come in with an outside perspective and an outside lens that these people who are already in the space don't necessarily have. So for the first year, I was able to ask questions about why we do the things that we do. Because, and honestly, it wasn't because I was naive or I really just didn't understand and I didn't know. And so I was able to ask questions. Why do we do that? Or how did that come about? Or where did this policy come from? Where did this practice come from? Is this a locally embedded policy and practice, or is this something that's ed code or from the state?
Right.
And come to find out that a lot of these practices we put into place that are barriers to student success. And so we have been able to eliminate or dismantle or restructure a lot of those policies and practices because someone 30 years ago put it into place at RCC or in the district.
Right.
So I think from this perspective and being new with this outside lens for somebody who's really equity minded and who really cares about the community and the students, I was able to say, maybe we should get rid of it, right? And raise my hand and say, what did that mean? I mean, we were using language and jargon that not even half the people in the room would question. Like they didn't know what it meant, but they would never raise their hand and say, what does that mean?
Right.
So I played that part for a really long time until people started to realize, we use language and we put things out there to students that they would never comprehend, and we never realized it before, or maybe we realized and we just never changed the way that we did things. So I would definitely encourage new people to step into the space. You have a specific gift and a lens that you'll bring to the table that we may have seen and heard before.
Right.
Yeah.
Deanna, how about you?
I would add in like what as far as what Monique was saying, like being able to have that, lens as an outsider, but also to be able to expand your reach and to expand your lens is to have a cross-functional team. I know that when I first joined, it was a lot of this is faculty led, right? And as you said, Melissa, like classified professionals have, a huge part in the work that we do. And engaging students and supporting students, right? And so, and then you want to have the student voice. So I would say definitely getting a cross-functional team that includes, all the different constituents, because you definitely need administrative support as well, because, you can't, you don't have power of the budget and power to, make certain things move. And so it's definitely important that you surround yourself with a support system. It's almost kind of like, having an advisory group, right? And you all move together and talk about certain issues. Because even though it is, stated as faculty led, you need all pieces in order for this to work effectively. And I think for us, like with Moreno Valley College, if I may be a moment of transparency, we didn't start right where, or when Norco and Riverside started. So for us, it was like a little bit of catch up, right? So sprinting and trying to, I don't know. I felt like you're in one of those grocery store games where they're like, okay, you got, 30 minutes to get, all these items, and so, or 30 seconds. And so you're grabbing and trying to think of the essentials and what you need and putting it all together. And hopefully you have a good meal in there, right? And so we found ourselves sometimes in some of those moments, but we were able to pull together and make it happen. And even if it isn't successful the first iteration, right? That's where you evaluate, assess, and you build from there and you improve. And we're not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect. And that was the message that I always, I give to everyone, is that Guided Pathways is fluid. Guided Pathways is not set in stone, right? It's always going to be evolving, as it should, right? As we're growing and as we see our data, change or shift or whatnot, we're going to have to shift. Or if we see it's not working, we're going to have to shift. So, and I think that I'll add, with the district, there has to be a certain level of alignment when you're in a multi-college district, which is very critical, because you want to ensure that students, we share the same students so that the messaging, is the same where it can be and should be. So just really making sure that you have partnerships at the district level and at your college level.
I there's two things about that. I want to say this without sounding pejorative. I always felt a little bad that Moreno Valley was being asked to catch up as fast and to be aligned and to be right with Norco and Riverside City College, because we had been working on the work for 4 years before and had gone to the GP20 and had all of that experience. And that was unfair a lot of the times, that we would be in a meeting together and we would be at this expectation to be someplace or to have something implemented. And we had the opportunity to do a lot more reflection and a longer period of time. And that always made me feel very uncomfortable. The second thing, though, that I really, really liked what you said was, I think we did a good job of bringing the district together through our collegial conversations in ways and in times when the district wasn't always in sync and always working together. But I felt like the Guided Pathways and equity work was always such important work and good work that we were able not necessarily to build together, but to share. So one team would build something and we like, ooh, we want that. Can we borrow that? And everybody was always so amazing and saying, yeah, of course, send your people over. We'll talk to them, whatever. That was always the biggest gift to us and our students, I think, is that we were able to say, yes, please take. Or, hey, yes, come. And I know we sent people over to Moreno Valley and you trained us in your community of practice work. That was really spectacular. We were sharing things, Monique, back and forth between the counseling faculty. And there's so much of that onboarding that needs to look similar and it needs to look the same.
Absolutely. And I think,
yeah, go ahead.
And we did also help lead the work of the region as well as a district. So we never told publicly like Moreno Valley is way behind, right? We still brought Moreno Valley to the table as we're restructuring and redesigning for the whole region, right? So we were all part of those Inland Empire Guided Pathways regional convenings where the district literally has led the way. And so publicly, we never said, but our district don't have it together, right?
Well, in amongst our friends. Yes. Okay. So I do think we helped to set a tone in other district things. I hear it in other district things that, GP and equity was always setting that tone of collaboration and not competition. And I think that helps set the tone in other spaces as well. And I see that now amongst our colleges and our colleagues. So I think that really helped a lot.
Yeah, if I can add really quick, I just want to point out that even like, we were sprinting. And when we got to the point, like even, Riverside and Norco, when we meet as a district, would be like, great job. You guys are, doing it. You guys have implemented your engagement center, success teams and things like that. And I still operated from a mindset of, but it's not, it's not where it should be, or it's not this, or it's not that, instead of really taking a moment to reflect and reward and see our great progress that we had made. We had made it, like we achieved many great things. But I still was operating from the place of, we got to do this. We got to catch up. And I think sometimes that's the lens of our students, right? Still bringing that, I guess I'll say, for lack of a better word, trauma, right? If you will, right? And that deficit mindset in a sense, like, but I'm still not good, or I'm still, we still have so far to go, instead of really being like, wow, look at me, I made it, and looking at, the capital that we have.
I think it's very similar to the student journey. Like, we are all so different. Like, RCC is so large. You literally have to move mountains, right? Whereas Norco and Moreno Valley, you could pick up tomorrow and be like, this is what we're going to do. And the whole college can be on board in 1 day or 2 days, whatever. And so we're all in different spaces in different places, but it's important to kind of, like you said, make sure we're reflecting on where we've been, right? How far we've come, where we've been. I mean, yes, draft 1.0. We're all like draft 1.0, moving on to draft 2.0, right? But I think that's one thing that I didn't do well through this process. And I took a lot of that weight on my back. Is like, gosh, we have so much further to go, and not really stopping a lot of times to recognize the highlights and the achievements that we had.
That is a perfect lead in. What was your biggest win personally, emotionally, that you walked away from and said, you know what? That was good. That was good work.
Oh man, it's so much, right? It's overwhelming as well, in some ways. But I think like our biggest win was really, I think, the launch of our engagement centers and student success teams. Also, we were really scaling our experiential learning components and e-portfolios, which was student-led, right? And they presented at conferences, and really designing their, learning how to track and design their work in an e-portfolio. So that way it is, they can showcase it to either, transfer universities or to their employers. And so really having, students be able to take ownership of a project that they designed and created for students was phenomenal. But I think really the biggest win is just really being able to think critically about our data and what it's
Mm.
really telling us, and to dive deep and to then think about what changes we can make and what we can implement as a college, because change is not easy, right? It's
Mm.
like a 4-letter word, right? And so being able to redesign whole, areas like our student services, we had a complete restructure. Academic affairs had a complete restructure with their departments, which isn't easy. It's
Mm-mm.
hard work, but it was heart work, at the same time. And so I think that's the biggest win, is just being able to see, the change that other and the work that we all put in collectively, and to be able to see the fruits of our labor.
That's very true. Monique.
I just say ditto. Like, we've had so many wins. I watch student success teams roll out. I've seen us build them over the last 3 years. I've seen the way that we analyze and look at data before. And I can definitely tell you 4 years ago when I stepped into this position, we were not looking at data the way that we look at it now, in terms of like disaggregated data by student pathways and programs of study, students of color who may be in those pathways that are not succeeding in the level they should be succeeding, the intentional outreach and activities that come behind now looking at that data differently, and how we are in small groups looking at it specifically to target special populations or particular populations of students. Like, we have come far in that area, whereas, no one wanted to look at data before. We knew what the data said, but we didn't look at it in the way that we needed to be intentional about it. And so I can definitely say the data piece. And I don't know if it's because we are counseling faculty, but the thing that I get rewarded from is watching the students grow as leaders in this space, watching them just flourish and blossom. And so starting the first student engagement project last year, where they were actually fully entrenched into our guided pathways work, fully entrenched into our, leadership councils and committees, and having, training them to be in those spaces. The way that their students' eyes light up to see that we are doing this work behind the scenes, they had no idea that this is the level of involvement that we do to make sure that they are successful and make sure the things that we're producing for them is beneficial. And so, I worked with 6 students last year, and I watched some of them be very not very outspoken, very timid. And then watching them after the full year, they were stepping into board of trustees, they were stepping into board meetings and presenting. They were going to conferences and presenting. They were doing student-led projects and videos and outreaching to students to say, what is it that you need? They created and developed their own surveys to really make sure that students were supported through the pandemic. So, I literally watched these students not know a whole lot, but watching how they took their skills and how we just helped them bring the skills that they already had out of them. And it was completely rewarding. I'm like a loss for words right now, just looking back at that memory. So many of them are so thankful for allowing them, for a lot of them, to have student employment or student worker positions through a pandemic, and they could do all their jobs online, solely online. That meant a lot to some of them who had kids at home, who now were in a virtual learning environment, and they were still being able to work 20 hours a week and get paid. And so I think there were so many different dynamics of that student engagement project that really helped our students, and has now led the way for other student engagement opportunities and projects to step foot onto our campus. Faculty members know that there are going to be students at their leadership councils and committees, and we need to figure out how to make sure that their voice is heard during those meetings. They're not just there as a fan, they're not just there. We need to actually utilize them now.
Right. I love that you both highlighted these macro things as well as micro things. We make these massive sweeping different changes to onboarding, to counseling, to engagement, and they're big, huge, affecting every student we have. And then we have individuals who are affected in different ways too, bringing students onto committees, bringing students onto project teams, bringing students in, having them help design their own portfolio projects. Those to me, it's the scope of the work that we're doing, and it demonstrates how meaningful it is. And that leads me to the interweaving of, you've already brought it up, both of you, that equity and guided pathways are interlocked. And And at Norco, we're actually going to be changing the name from Guided Pathways and Equity to actually Equity in Guided Pathways. And we would like to see the equity plan become the forefront, and that the Guided Pathways is really the framework and the vehicle through which we do the equity work. So changing that mindset of Guided Pathways as the thing first and equity coming along. No, it's actually equity first, equity out front, and Guided Pathways is our tool to help do it in many ways. So how do you see your colleges doing that same transition, or is that not the transition, or are you already there?
Yeah, so we're actually working on that transition to align the work. If I may, I think that we have to get away from looking at guided pathways as something separate, like,
Mm.
oh, that's guided pathways. Oh, that's this, that's over there, right? And because it's not, it's everything. It's taking a look at a holistic view at everything that we do, seeing what's ineffective, what's not working, where our equity gaps are, and really trying to figure out what we can do differently to get different results. And so, I, I don't know. I guess with that, it just the work of guided pathways, what we're looking at right now actually is looking at overlaying that work into our existing structures.
Mm.
And we feel like that's how it probably should have been to create sustainability, and not a separate group working on separate things. Okay, of course, if it's something that we don't have, that there's no existing structure where the work can take place, you would create a task force and then from there figure out how to make it sustainable, and then that should dissolve. And that's kind of what we would like to do. So embedding that with, with our student equity plan and our SCA committee is a start for us. But we also feel like, the work will also not just reside there, right? It will reside, within our existing structures to create this sustainability so we can be more proactive and, less reactive, so to speak. And really realizing that the work that we're doing is to, for social justice, racial justice, right? Racial equity. It's for, closing our equity gaps. It's for student success, retention, persistence, like all the things. And so that's, the lens that we're looking at it through right now. And so we are meeting with SCA leadership as well to see what their plan is and what the goals are in the plan and what the activities and objectives, because we're finding that a lot of times we're working in silos. And so this group over here is working on the same exact thing that the SCA committee is working on. And so, who should do the work? How can we, make it seamless as well as more effective to maximize resources. We don't need two different groups, not who aren't communicating with each other, working on the same thing. So really identifying the areas where the work is occurring and then developing an action plan based off of that. And it'd be more of a coordination effort as opposed to, I think a lot of us got burnt out because we were actually doing the work. Where'd that flyer come from? Right? Where did, the draft of the plan come from?
I have an account on Canva. I make flyers a lot.
Right. Who's meeting with the webmaster? Us, so just to really, disseminate the work where it should go.
Yeah. Monique?
I think so state never really did a good job in the beginning of really helping institutions see the intersectionality of equity and guided pathways and why we were doing the work that we were doing. We had this end goal in mind. We knew what we were trying to reach for, but we really didn't know how to connect the data to that. And even you see in the scale of adoption that it was an afterthought to add equity principles to each of the different areas. And from being in this work over the last 4 years, I bring a specific intersectionality to this space as being a woman and a woman of color leading this work. So there was already passion inside of me to make sure that the community, I was raised here as a Black woman in the Empire. So it has, community colleges has a special part of my heart in terms of making sure that students of color are getting through the pathway, that they're getting careers, that they can make, financial living for themselves and for their family, and helping them see that education is the key to their future, essentially. And I knew that the community college, we didn't do a lot of that. I've been in this system for 10 years and I've never seen a lot of intentional efforts going towards students of color. I mean, and a lot of people in my family went to community colleges and took 9, 10, 11 years. So thank God for AB 705. And my brother is a product of the community college system and took 4 years to get through English and math. And so I know from my experiences that something had to be different. And so stepping into this leadership role, and if you see across the state, many people in these roles are people of color who are tired and burned out in this space. But we had to create some type of foundation for the people who are going to carry on the torch after us, right? And so that foundation to me, which all schools would say is a plan, right? We had to create a plan that someone would follow after us. And so 2 years ago with my leadership team, we built a guided pathways plan that had equity embedded in that guided pathways plan, that pulled out our equity data that said, this is why we are doing the things that we are doing in our institution to support this particular these groups of students. So in our introduction to our guided pathways plan, this is what it said. There was the call to action from the chancellor's office, and that is embedded in our guided pathways plan. Each area or identified subject area in our guided pathways plan specifically calls out a group on campus or a particular position on campus and the things they need to do in a particular area to help us meet those Vision for Success goals and to meet our equity data goals that we had. And so I think this is the first time, there was pushback, and I'm not going to lie, and I'll be transparent in this space. Why are you calling out Black students all throughout your plan? Why not this group of students? Why not that group of students? It's too Black. And so now we're going back to have those conversations of why do we need to intentionally call out the things that we do to support Black students specifically, right? And it wasn't just Black students written in the plan, but that was the basis of why this plan was developed. It was a call to action that said, in my role, that we have to be able to lay out what these guidelines are, what our guiding principles are, why we're doing the work that we're dodoing. And so now we have a 2-year guided pathways plan that has equity written from the beginning to the end. And I didn't just write this myself. The leadership didn't just write this out. I had institutional effectiveness be a part of that planning process. We took it through the strategic planning process. It went through academic senate. And of course, we added groups in that, we may have missed, right? We added in particular objectives and strategies to the plan that we may have missed because we can't, and honestly, we don't have all ends. And that's why it's important to have these plans go through the strategic planning process to make sure that no one is left out, but also let them know we are not going to back down from intentionally calling out these groups of students, whether it's foster youth or whether it's Black students or whether it's LGBTQ community that really needs to be supported through this redesign and restructure. So I think, you have to be equity minded in this space and a leader in this role in order to truly help us meet our goals of not only our institution, but the district.
100%. I would say that we needed to go and be trained at Norco. We went to the Cora trainings at USC, and we studied Ben Simone, and we studied all the people who told us this was the how to get this work done. But without that training, I think the resistance and the bias would have continued to creep in. And some of it may have been intentional, some of it may have been unintentional bias. I'm not going to try to examine the motivations of the people resisting, but I think it was essential for us to send people to trainings so that when people would say, why is it specifically calling out Black students, they had the research and the data and the philosophy to say, this is why. We are educators. We are going to research things, and we are going to be data-driven and research-driven in our methodology. And without that connection between those two, I think people were able to resist because a system that is 500 years old doesn't want to move. It doesn't want to change. It is intended to keep people out. We have to be really honest about that. Our educational system is intended to keep people out. It's intended to stop people. It's intended to tell them they're not smart enough and they don't belong. And if we don't dismantle that, and at the community college, here we are saying, we're an open entry institution. We let everybody in. But the very first thing we did was give them a test and tell them they weren't worthy and they didn't belong in college. And by the way, you don't measure up. So dismantling those things, even though intellectually we're like, well, that doesn't seem right. That seems counterintuitive to what we do. We needed the research and the backing to do that. And that was through professional development. And that couldn't just be a subset of faculty or administrators who were interested. It had to go across the board. It had to be everybody at the institution in order to pull that same direction. So thank you for bringing that up. I think we've made a lot of strides as a district and as institutions because we've been willing to put ourselves out there. And I am not a person of color, but I have worked really, really hard to be an advocate and to create spaces for voices for people who need to be saying what they need to say. And in my position as in power that I had and have had over the years, that is the biggest thing I've learned, is that it isn't my voice that needs to be heard. I need to create spaces for new people's voices, for people who haven't had a space before. And so I try to wield my platform for that. And I'm at the end of my college career as a professor. I'll be leaving and retiring in a few years. And so the more people I can get into my spaces and I can advocate for them and give them oxygen, that I will feel I have done my job and that I can leave feeling really good about it. So thank you for bringing that up. I get a little on my soapbox about it. But it's important, and people need to continue to be going to the trainings, and people need to be going to the professional development. And we need to tie that professional development as well into our plans. Mm-hmm. Because we're not going to just figure it out as we go.
We don't do a lot of closing the loop on professional development. So we do a lot of training. Sometimes it's the same people going to the trainings, people who already have their heart, their skin in the game. But what do they do with it? Mm-hmm. Go to your trainings. Where can we show the facts that I've actually implemented something in the classroom? I've actually changed this practice, or how I advise based on this professional development opportunity that I have a chance for. And I really would love to start seeing how people are utilizing that professional development in their space or their area.
Yeah, I was just, telling someone on our diversity committee the same thing, like perhaps we have, a certain, maybe it's just one learning outcome. And we, from, our diversity events, right? And then from there, we embed that in all the work we do for the year, and we assess it. And then we come back full circle, or something that really holds us accountable to, what we're learning and bringing it back to our institution to implement. Because a lot of times, we'll spend money on bringing people out, and everyone will attend, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this is great. But then the momentum kind of dies off, or, they gave us some good tools, some good nuggets. Okay, now let's go, or some good seeds, let's go plant them, right? So they can grow. And I think that we need to do more of that and be more intentional and, hold ourselves accountable to really bringing that work and integrating it in what we're currently doing.
So last question. What do we need to do to move forward, to sustain this work moving on? Because it's not going to end. There is no end. You don't get to the end and say, I'm done. Equity is done. You don't, ta-da, we're equity. That doesn't work. So how do we sustain? How do we keep going? How do we move into the next phase? I think COVID has changed a lot of our practices. It has given us an opportunity to really examine our students' needs and move into a space that is in the 21st century. So how do we move forward? And I'm going to start with Monique this time.
So one time I don't have a response. The pandemic has taught us a lot, right? It's highlighted a lot of those inequities that we already knew existed, that, some of our students didn't have internet or Wi-Fi or laptops or basic housing needs. I mean, we have been through a lot over the last 2 years. And if we professionally have been through a lot in the last 2 years, only imagine the magnitude that impact has had on our students in terms of trauma. Not just the pandemic, but the social unrest in our communities as well. Like I know I am completely taxed. Like I don't even know what I have left to give, right? So I just, the compassion and the grace, like we need to be able to lead with that. We need to be able to understand that our needs of our students 4 years ago may not still be the same needs of them now. They may need something different from us, right? That are more than just material things. They need more than just internet and laptops and spaces to engage. Like they need us to be human in those spaces with them and really to help them grow and develop as leaders, help them grow and develop as activists. Like there's a lot of things that need to change in the next, we are building the future. So if we don't build them correctly, we'll be sitting here still talking about this in 20 years. And so grace and compassion is definitely, I would say, at the top of our list, and just being able to sit back and listen for once and really listen. We do a lot of surveying, we do a lot of focus groups, but what do we do with that information? We may change one thing, but we don't really listen. And so I think now is the time for us to be able to do that, and for us to be able to heal as a community, as an institution, as a district. We need to be able to come back together and rethink and reorganize and then move forward for sure.
Very nice. Deanna?
I would just say that it's, important for us to shift our perspective from that of a deficit mindset to that of cultural capital. Our students come to us with cultural wealth and resilience. And so if we couple that with front-loaded resources to help students realize and achieve their goals, it will really help them and help us, right, be able to achieve our mission and our values, right, and what we are as community colleges. It's critical to really identify why and how we embrace or resist sustainable efforts, right, and really evaluating ourselves. And I think as long as we continue to have, the mindset of being able to try something, right, and then look at it, evaluate it, assess it, and improve, right? That whole cycle, then that definitely is going to propel us in the direction that we want to go, and always keeping students at the forefront. Like I always say, and everyone says, if there were no students, there would be no us, right? And so that is my purpose, right? That's my passion.
That's spectacular. That's a really great place to end. And I appreciate you and all the work that you have put in, and all the work that you have done, and all of the forward-thinking, hard, emotionally, everything you have given to this work. And thank you for sitting down with me this morning and talking to me about your work in Guided Pathways. I hope it inspires someone else to pick up and to come into and give them a little perspective on the work that we've been doing, and the terrific work that both of you have done in RCCD and at Moreno Valley and Riverside City College. This has been Would You Like to Know More About? Thank you for tuning in to listen to Guided Pathways at the District.